Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about tribe and how it is that we find our way to spiritual community. There's the importance of spiritual connection in the seeker's life. It can't be overstated. The seeker's journey is often quite solitary, as many of you know. It's a lifelong process that's always beginning and never finished. And that's why the presence of like-minded compatriots, fellow seekers, is especially crucial. Finding people who share our particular practice or our faith or our worldview, and with whom we can share what the Sufis call sohbet, or the spiritual talk of friends. Now, sohbet is at the heart of the Seekers Forum, of course. I created this community as a non-religious, non-sectarian place for this kind of spiritual conversation to take place, where we can support one another on our respective paths of truth and be reminded that no matter how solitary or self-directed or introspective our practice may be, we're not alone. We share a universal desire to connect to our spiritual source and awaken to who we truly are. Each of us is born with an innate knowledge that beyond the trappings of our worldly lives, there's a dimension of spiritual possibility that we barely glimpse in the course of ordinary existence. The purpose of our spiritual tribe is to remind us of this possibility when our memories lapse, when the mundane responsibilities of life swallow us up and we lose sight of the truth. Our fellow seekers are our great allies in helping to remember that if only we continue our practice and hone our desire for freedom and enlightenment, we can make steady progress in the direction of liberation. But what defines a seeker exactly? And how are we fundamentally different from what you could call the philosophically disinterested? The majority of people in the world are really not drawn to the seeker's life. The philosophically disinterested find spiritual inquiry, if not anathema, at least something to be avoided or not interesting or just not necessary. That isn't a judgment. There are many kind, wise, well-meaning people who aren't consumed by philosophical inquiry. They're either too well-balanced or simply uncurious about the seeker's life. They don't feel this urgent need to examine the more mysterious aspects of existence. It's just not in their nature. It holds no particular fascination. I'm sure many of you are surrounded by people like that in your lives. There are folks in the world who like to take watches apart to see how they work. And there are others of us who feel moved to take existence itself apart, to examine its moving constituents, to see how life works, how it gets broken, how to put it back together again. We have an existential curiosity, a temperament that forces us to ask questions that penetrate the surface of things. We long to explore life's deeper truths, to engage on an elemental level, and to open ourselves to mystery and to revelation. We want to know ourselves below the skin, and in this pursuit, seekers are often folks who go against the grain, who challenge norms, who push boundaries, and are troubled by the kinds of things that leave most people cold. What does life mean? Where did we come from? Where are we going? What's illusion and what is truth? What's the nature of faith? How do we realize our connection to our eternal source and self? How do we live as spiritual beings in physical bodies and integrate the metaphysical with the worldly? Finally, how is this awareness possible in the run of our ordinary lives? That's the intention of the Seeker's Challenge. And like all true affinities, all great loves, this intention, this seeker's life, finds us rather than the other way around. You can't turn yourself into a seeker if you're not one, although life can do that for you. Sometimes through revelation, other times, more often, through crisis or enormous change, the loss of a life story that leaves a great opening or a blessed wound through which we can enter the spiritual path. Many of us are brought to spiritual life kicking and screaming, not because we choose it, but because we have no other choice. We come to the end of the road in terms of a conventional life and feel the need to step into a different way of seeing and being and exploration. But we can't conjure that into existence. It has to choose us. You may choose to ignore this vocation, this calling to the truth or to devotion and wisdom, but it's never going to disappear entirely. It's going to continue in you as that holy longing, that flame of discontent that we were talking about last month. And if we don't give this flame of discontent what you could call sacred fuel through practice or prayer or attention, it's very likely to scorch us from within and leave us either addicts or malcontents, uneasy souls, unhappy with our lot, not sure why it is that we never feel quite connected, never quite whole, never quite present. And often it's because we're ignoring that flame of discontent that's calling us to the seeker's path. When we do surrender to this calling, however, and manage to find our way into the company of other seekers, we have a great sense of homecoming, of having found our people, even when our belief systems differ. And this comes as an enormous relief, as I discovered in my own life. Speaking personally, I had spent my childhood feeling extremely isolated, almost freakish, with an inordinate need to ask questions and puzzle over everything. Nobody around me seemed to care about the things that I was obsessed with. Things like why, when I looked into the mirror, was I aware of something watching me from behind my own eyes, a kind of presence that was me but not me. Or why, when I opened the trash can and came upon a dead bird that had been ripped in two by a neighbor's cat, why it is that I knew, or I should probably say suspected, that the spirit of the bird wasn't this pile of bloody feathers and bone, but the thing in it that had flown away, that had escaped. I had no one to talk to about these things and felt increasingly alone in my confusion as I got older and life became more complicated. And spiritual need increased. I came to feel that there was something broken in me that I'd never be able to fix by myself. I believed that this brokenness, this longing, was a personal flaw. There was something wrong with me. And this belief created a deep melancholy and isolation that I masked for a long time with worldly satisfactions. It wasn't until my life really fell apart in my late 20s, when seeking became a matter of life and death, that I began a conscious spiritual search and came to learn that this hunger in me wasn't personal at all, nor was it a flaw in the least, but that in fact this discontent and this sense of not being whole was the motivating force behind every seeker's journey. It was the fuel without which it can't really happen. I came to realize that I was part of a larger tribe of men and women who've questioned existence since the dawn of time and who've chosen to live lives of conscious self-inquiry and spiritual practice in order to be free and to know ourselves in our divine essence. Meeting other seekers like me was a true homecoming, and I saw that many of the things I thought were wrong with me were precisely what made me right for the life of a seeker. This came as a huge relief to me, knowing that although we are a minority, the seeker's call is universal and essential to the evolution of our race. Most of you have had your own version of this recognition, of journeying through confusion and isolation before encountering people like you, with whom to share the most compelling, valuable part of yourself, your soul longing, your heart hunger. And you know what a great discovery it is to realize that the traits that set you apart, that seem to mark you as insatiable or even unstable, in fact, link you to a distinguished, time-honored heritage of spiritual seekers that dates back to our earliest ancestors. So this is the positive motivation that brings us together in this forum, to join with our fellow seekers in the communal act of awakening, to elevate the race through our common effort to access and actualize our spiritual potential. And yet, like many of our best intentions, This urge to form spiritual tribes does have a shadow, as everybody knows. When tribes become exclusive religions pretending to have the best or the only way to God and cling to a fundamentalist letter of the law approach, the result is conflict and horror and bloodshed. The very institutions that are meant to elevate consciousness and open our hearts to our fellow men become armies of holy opposition, bloodthirsty groups who'd rather see non-members dead than free to follow their own lights. Tribalism easily becomes the basis of war, whether the tribe is defined by geography, by ancestry, by politics, or by faith. When you create an in-group of any kind, you necessarily form an out-group as well, and that sets up an us versus them dynamic. The more exclusive the tribe becomes, the more likely it is to defend its turf. And in terms of conflict or threat, these delineations become more rigid, and the tension between groups becomes more institutionalized. In the case of religious groups, beliefs are used as justifications for every imaginable abuse and horror. In the name of God, we behave like devils, and tribes that began as vehicles for supporting the faithful in their spiritual lives morph into their very opposite. That's why among many spiritual seekers today, the word religion has mixed connotations. Although its roots come from to link or to join together, religion comes to suggest fanaticism, narrow-mindedness, rigidity, and ridiculous rules that have nothing to do with God, enlightenment, or liberation. Though the purpose of the religious impulse originally was to help us transcend our differences, to bring us together under the same cosmic roof, as one anthropologist put it, to give us a place where me can become we, the opposite too often has come to pass. Now, of course, there are wonderful religious institutions and very wise individuals in their midst who haven't lost sight of what spirituality offers. People who are able to have their personal beliefs, to be devoted to their particular faith without closing their minds and hearts to others. And yet it is undeniable that a growing number of formerly religious people are turning away from their churches and temples in favor of creating their own faith tribes that are more open to alternative beliefs, more flexible in their ideologies, and willing to evolve and adapt in a multicultural, global spiritual community. This growing movement toward free thinking and toward combining traditions is extremely threatening to religious institutions, which tend to dig their heels in more deeply with every modern advance. And yet, in spite of fundamentalist fears, the train of new thinking and adaptation has left the station, spiritually speaking. Okay, there's no turning back. There's no stopping it now. A recent spate of books with titles like A Religion of One's Own, Thomas Moore's last book, or Keeping the Faith Without a Religion, Roger Houston's last book, confirm this movement. We've entered a new age of spiritual invention and freedom, and that's a wonderful, hopeful thing. It's also the reason that we have Catholics and Episcopalians, Protestants, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, and many agnostics and atheists in the Seekers Forum, able to hear one another's views and recognize in each other varying aspects of commonality and beauty in our respective traditions. Groups such as ours come together to learn and to appreciate, to test our convictions, to compare, to contrast and absorb, and to enrich our spiritual lives without fear of losing our membership in some exclusive religion or other. It's also why many progressive leaders of various faiths recommend a more pliable, modern approach to spirituality. Starting with the Dalai Lama himself. The Dalai Lama has counseled curiosity and tolerance among his followers, warning that if Buddhism doesn't adapt to the West, it's going to die. Or someone like the late Father Bede Griffiths, the Benedictine monk who devoted 50 years of his life to creating a Christian Hindu ashram in South India, where these two great faiths could begin to work together. Or someone like Paramahansa Yogananda, who did the same thing with Hinduism and Christianity, but in reverse, as an Indian living in the United States. The list goes on and on. This isn't to recommend a smorgasbord approach to spiritual practice, hopping from one tradition to the next when things get too demanding or less pleasing in the moment. It's simply to state that whatever practice we adopt must maintain an open window to let in new ideas and a back door open through which to exit if necessary, should the rules of our group change or our particular needs change, or when we no longer find communion in our tribe. It's important to have the courage of our own convictions and walk away. When the Buddha taught his disciples to be a light unto yourself, that's what he was talking about. Not to abandon our own discernment, not to give our power away, or to look to spiritual authority as children to surrogate parents to tell us what to do, but rather to remember that the light is always within us. And the purpose of religion or of any spiritual tribe is to point us to what is already there and to remind us that we are already home. Now, in considering the matter of finding a tribe, I'd just like to mention 3 important questions to ask when you're connecting to a community that's going to help you rather than hinder you on the path of awakening. The first question to ask yourself is, what is the price of admission? What does membership in this spiritual tribe require? It's very important to have a sense of the parameters that are imposed by your spiritual community. At the far extreme of this is the possibility of actual cultism, of course. Now, cultism sounds much farther away and much less within the realm of possibility than it actually is. For example, a highly intelligent woman I know stumbled into a lovely group of people she really connected to on a soul level. In her home to meet their teacher. She was so enamored of the group chemistry and the sense of togetherness that she failed to ask important, pertinent questions, such as, what do you mean I can't date men outside my group? Or why is it that if I come and I'm a part of the community, I have to give up my personal bank account and put everything into a group kitty? Or why is it that you're asking me to stand up in front of the group and be taken down and humiliated in the name of some kind of spiritual practice? You get my drift. It took this person I know years to free herself of a tribe that seemed in the beginning to be heaven sent. On a less dramatic scale, every group has its own demands and power struggles, its own manipulations, its own scales of expectations. And that's why it's crucial to ask from the beginning, what aspect of your natural being are you being asked to reject or embrace? Okay, what aspects of your natural being are you allowed to keep, and what are you expected to sacrifice? Ask yourself, is tolerance of difference encouraged, or is it frowned upon? Are you encouraged or at least permitted to adapt this group's credo to your personal needs and desires? And if not, what are the consequences of disobedience? That's a very important question to ask. Are these rules and regulations that you want to live with? If so, then you've probably found a good place to land. But if not, if you're chronically troubled by certain germane aspects of the group, it's best to be honest with yourself from the beginning and cut your losses. While there's no such thing as a perfect fit, we do tend to know the truth in our bodies if we stop and listen and are honest with ourselves. The connection with sangha, or community, like every intimate relationship, is as visceral as it is rational. So notice how you feel. How do you feel in the midst of these people? Is there any fear? Is there apprehension? Is there anxiety? Are there parts of yourself that you need to hide? Do you feel in perpetual conflict that you have a hard time resolving? And does that register in your body as a sense of disconnection? These are very, very important signals to pay attention to at the beginning of a relationship with a new spiritual tribe or community. The next question to ask when considering a sangha or a group is, what are the articles of faith? Even though we may be attracted to the members of a community, a spiritual tribe is more than a social mixer. It's important to ask ourselves about the actual philosophical underpinnings and beliefs, the tenets that are supporting the spiritual group in question. Do these tenets, do these beliefs, do these articles of faith align with your own authentic beliefs? Does the worldview of this group mirror your own? Do the shared rituals and practices suit your needs and temperament? Because we each do have a spiritual temperament that needs to be understood and respected if we hope to find harmony with our chosen tribe. Some people love rituals, others don't. Some people enjoy prayer while it leaves others feeling empty and dry. Some seekers require a physical element in their faith, such as yoga, while others are happy to be sedentary and focused on the transcendental. There are people who like regular meetings and accountability, while others prefer a more freewheeling drop-in style, like many of the people in the Seekers Forum. There are folks who require authority, who are more oriented toward a one-up, one-down relationship in their spiritual community, who feel comfortable and comforted relying on a priest or a rabbi or a guru or an imam. And there are others who seek no intermediary between themselves and the divine. If you're someone, for instance, who doesn't like to confess or atone or enact contrition, you'd be unwise to join the Catholic Church. If you're a person who thrives on rules and external discipline, you'd be smart to avoid looser-fitting groups, such as you find in the worlds of non-duality and self-inquiry, for example, where there is no spiritual hierarchy, and where everyone is expected to be a lamp unto himself. And finally, where is the power and the authority in this spiritual group that you're thinking of joining? Is it domineering and authoritarian? Does the head of your tribe walk the talk? Or are there obvious marks of hypocrisy or even abuse in the power structure of this spiritual community? For example, a student of mine joined a Jewish temple that seemed to fit her to a T. She loved it. She gave her devotion to this rabbi who seemed wonderful, and she felt as if she'd finally found her people. She attended services, she gave her money, she formed deep friendships with the people in this community. But she overlooked signs of trouble, particularly around financial demands and breaches of boundary by her rabbi. Until one day, seemingly without warning, this congregation fell apart over the news that this teacher was sleeping with his students and lying about it and swearing them to secrecy and doing serious damage to their lives. This was devastating to her, as you can imagine, and left the student of mine deeply cynical and disillusioned. And in fact, she turned away from her spiritual calling and from the seeker's path and has never quite found her way back again. That's what can happen when bad authority takes over and hypocrisy is overlooked, as it too often is by members of a tribe, okay? with leaders who don't walk the talk or practice that doesn't really align in some way with integrity. This popular notion of separating the messenger from the message is actually a terrible idea in spiritual life, and is potentially very dangerous. In my experience, it's extremely important that the message and the messenger be in alignment with one another, because the world is full of spiritual charlatans and hypocrites who attempt to exploit their tribe at their most vulnerable point, which is our spiritual hunger. And that's why it's up to each of us to keep our eyes open to the abuses of power and gaps of integrity among our spiritual authority figures. So if you pay attention to these three matters, in particular, expectations, the expectations of the group you're joining, the beliefs underlying the group, the actual tenets, the articles of faith, and the power structure in the community, it's going to help you move in a wise direction when you're choosing your tribe and knowing where to put your faith and trust. When you do this and find yourself connected to a sangha or community that truly suits you, It's an enormous gift on the seeker's journey and can carry you through the good times and the bad, and remind you when you forget, as it's all too easy to forget in the course of our everyday lives, of your sacred potential in the moments when you need it the most. And one last note about finding our tribe in the electronic age. You know, we live at a time when there's unprecedented access to spiritual wisdom. On YouTube, on other social media outlets, we're able to find the teachings of the world's greatest masters, past and present. So take the time to investigate what's out there, what attracts you, what avenues to real-life communities are open to you that you may not be aware of. Whether or not you're able to meet with them in person, you'll be amazed by what's possible. I discovered YouTube a few years back, and I find I'm able now to listen to some of my greatest my greatest spiritual heroes, the people who speak the deepest to my own soul's yearning through the medium of the electronic age. I can listen to Krishnamurti, I can listen to Punjaji, I can listen to His Holiness, I can listen to Gangaji, who's another wonderful teacher, Eckhart Tolle. These people are out there online. So avail yourself of this wisdom. It's a fantastic resource. It's really a treasure trove that's available to us at the push of a button in the privacy of our own homes anytime that we want it. So look into YouTube, look into social media, and allow your horizon to open up, your perspective to open up. We've moved out of the time when the guru needs to live nearby, or when we need to necessarily hit the pilgrim's trail and seek out community, in far-flung places. We can access this in the privacy of our own homes anytime that we want. So you have fantastic potential for exploring and discovering new groups of people that can open your eyes and open your heart and deepen this journey toward awakening.